Don Hilario Montoya signed the last paper before his son had finished growing cold. What he signed was not just the name of a property. It was the name of his daughter-in-law, crossed out forever. Or so he believed. Welcome to Stories Between Lives. There are fathers-in-law who don't even wait for the burial to claim what was never theirs. Isidro Vizquez de Montoya learned this at 4 in the afternoon of that same day, when the notary arrived with his papers and set them on the table where that morning they had eaten breakfast together for the last time. This is her story, and that of the servant who kept the key. Rodrigo Montoya had died at 10 in the morning, an infection that came in fast and left too late, the way things come when there's no longer time to say goodbye properly. He was 43 years old. Isidra was 40. Mateo, the son of them both, was 8 years old and limped on his left side ever since the fever at age 6 had left one leg shorter than the other. 12 years Isidra had lived at La Providencia, 12 years planting the garden, raising the cattle, keeping the ranch's accounts when Rodrigo was off on the roads, picking Mateo up when he fell among the stones of the patio because the leg didn't always obey. Don Hilario and Doa Enadina arrived at 2 in the afternoon. They weren't crying. At 4, the notary Trujillo arrived. Don Hilario called Isidra into the dining room. There were the notary, Doa Enadina, the family's eldest son who'd come from Tuxtla, and Juana, the 35-year-old servant of the Hacienda, who had stayed standing in the kitchen doorway without anyone telling her to leave. Rodrigo left us clear instructions, said Don Hilario. The property passes to the Montoya family. You have no right to anything that's here. Isidra looked at him. Rodrigo's body was in the back room, waiting for the priest. What instructions? Verbal. We are witnesses. The notary Trujillo set a paper on the table. Isidra didn't sign it. Don Hilario said they didn't need her signature. Your name was already removed from the registry as of this morning. This morning. When Rodrigo was still breathing, by the time it's light, I want you and the boy gone from here, said Don Hilario. He looked at Juana. You too, Juana. You've been taking sides for many years. Juana didn't answer. She had her hand in her apron, gripping something no one else saw. That night, Isidra packed what fit in a suitcase. Mateo's clothes, his medicines for the pain in his leg, a blouse Rodrigo had brought her from San Cristobal the year before because he liked the color. Nothing more. At 6 the next morning, she crossed the gate of La Providencia with Mateo by the hand and the worn blue rebozo on her shoulders. Without looking back. Looking back would have been more than she could carry. Juana was waiting for her on the road. I know where to go, she said. Follow me. Taamata's little house was 4 kilometers away, up a path that sometimes disappeared among the ferns and the damp earth of Chiapas. It was an adobe house with a sheet metal roof and a patio where a bougainvillea had grown on its own for years and now covered half the wall, as if it had decided to stay and care for the place when there was no longer anyone to do it. Taamata had died 5 years earlier. No one had claimed the little house. What Isidra didn't yet know was that Juana had been cleaning it in secret for the past 3 weeks. They went in silence. Mateo lay down on the sleeping mat of the small room without asking anything, with that wisdom of children who learn early that sometimes silence is the most that adults can offer. Juana lit the fire. She put water on to boil. She took the cornetol she'd brought from her sack. Did you know this was going to happen? Isidra asked. I suspected it. Don Rodrigo did too. Isidra looked at her. Did he say something to you? He gave me something. 3 weeks ago. when he was already feeling bad but could still speak well. "What did he give you?" Juana served the atola without answering right away. "I'll give it to you when it's the moment." She set the gourd in front of Isidra. "First eat, and let Mateo sleep." That night, Isidra couldn't sleep. She heard the crickets of Chiapas and the wind among the trees and Mateo's quiet breathing in the next room. She thought of Rodrigo. In the last week, when he could no longer get up but still spoke, he had told her, "You know, this is yours. Don't let them tell you no." She had thought it was the fear of a sick man. She didn't know it was an instruction. The next morning, Juana already had coffee, and the patio swept with that silent meticulousness of someone who has spent decades doing things well, because things well done are her only way of saying she's present. Mateo went out to take the sun beside the bougainvillea. His left leg rested extended over the stones. "Are we going to stay here?" he asked. "For now, yes, and the Hacienda?" Isidra took a while to answer. That too. Juana, from inside, heard the answer. She nodded to herself. The days in the little house took a slow, stubborn rhythm. Juana got up before everyone. She lit the fire. She warmed the coffee. She swept without anyone asking her. It was her way of saying the house was alive, even though everything that had happened said otherwise. Isidra cleared the small garden in the patio that had been pure weeds. She did it with her hands and an old machete from the shed. She planted epazote and cilantro, and a chile plant Juana gave her. She had no money for more, but she had hands and time, and those two things together produce more than it seems. Mateo helped her with what he could. He sat at the edge and stripped chiles and separated seeds and counted the hummingbirds that came to the bougainvillea. He walked more slowly than other children his age, but he walked. The rocking chair in the corridor, the one that had been Ta Amada's, became Juana's place. There she sat in the afternoons, when the day's work was done, hands in her lap and eyes on the Chiapas hillside that from the corridor looked like a green wall that never tired of being green. Isidra's worn blue rebozo was always present. She used it to carry herbs from the garden, to cover herself on the cold nights of the hill, to cover Mateo's shoulders when he fell asleep in the patio. It was the only object she had brought that had been with her many years, from before La Providencia, from before Rodrigo, from when she was just Isidra Vizquez, and nothing more. After a week, a neighbor came with tortillas and beans. She said she'd heard there were people in Ta Amada's little house and asked if they needed anything. Isidra thanked her with the dignity of someone not used to receiving, but who knows there are moments when refusing is a luxury one can't afford. The second week came news that Don Hilario had put a new administrator at La Providencia, that the animals were under someone else's charge, that the garden Isidra had planted over 7 years was beginning to be neglected. Isidra heard it all without saying anything. Then she went to the garden and kept working. Juana watched her from the rocking chair. "Don Rodrigo was right about you." "What did he say about me?" "That you were the kind of person who bends, but doesn't break." It was the third week when Juana decided it was the moment. That night, after Mateo fell asleep, Juana took from the bottom of her sack what she'd kept for more than 3 weeks. She set it on the kitchen table under the firelight. It was a silver medallion, small, round, with the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe on the front and the back polished smooth. The chain was cut. "Don Rodrigo gave it to me the week before he got very bad," said Juana. "He told me, keep it for Isidra for when she needs it. She'll know what to do." Isidra took the medallion. She looked at it. She turned it over. "What's in it?" "Look closely at the back." But Isidra didn't know that this silver medallion held something that was going to change everything. The back had a very fine groove running along the edge, almost invisible. Isidra felt it before she saw it. She ran her nail along the rim. The back cover gave way with a very soft sound. A tiny box that had spent weeks waiting. Inside there was a paper, minuscule, rolled up tight as if whoever stored it had measured every millimeter. Isidra unrolled it with her fingertips on the table and smoothed it slowly. It was Rodrigo's handwriting. She recognized it in the first curve of the first letter, under the third stone of the cistern in the garden. Everything is there. God first. I leave it all to you. R. Isidra read it twice. The third time she read it aloud, so the words would fill the room and become real. Juana crossed herself. Do you know which stone? Isidra asked. I know where the cistern is. You know it better than I do. The cistern of La Providencia. The one Isidra had discovered in her third year, covered by weeds, and had cleaned alone for 2 weeks until she made it functional. The one Rodrigo had watched her clean and had said, "This garden deserves you." That night, with the Chiapas hillside dark and the dew falling over the ferns, Isidra and Juana went back to La Providencia. Not through the gate, through the back path that crosses the old coffee field and comes out straight into the garden. The one only those who lived that land a long time know. There was no one in the garden. The dogs Isidra had raised didn't bark when they smelt her. The cistern was in its corner beneath the cedron. Isidra counted the stones of the rim. 1, 2, 3. The third was loose. It moved with both hands. Beneath it was a tin can sealed with candle wax. Isidra lifted it. It was heavy. Back at the little house, on the table with Juana holding the candle and Mateo asleep in the next room, Isidra opened the can. Inside, in waxed cloth, the property title of La Providencia, registered 6 months before Rodrigo's death, with the name of Isidra Vizquez de Montoya as sole owner. A letter of 2 pages, signed and dated the month before the end, in which Rodrigo wrote down why he had updated the title and declared that no verbal instruction to his parents about the property had ever existed. And a leather pouch with gold coins. Enough for a lawyer. Enough for a year. Isidra couldn't speak for a moment. Juana could. Don Rodrigo knew he was going to die. And he knew what his parents were going to do. A pause. He'd spent months preparing this. He only needed someone he trusted to keep the key. Why you? Because 35 years of work give me the right to be trusted with a key. And she said no more. That same week, with the title in hand, Isidra went to the municipal court. Licenciado Arriaga, a notary of honest reputation whom Juana had contacted through a cousin, reviewed the documents unhurriedly. He confirmed what they said. The title was valid prior to Rodrigo's death, and the removal of Isidra's name that the notary Trujillo had carried out was null because it had been done on a registry that was no longer in effect. And Trujillo? Isidra asked. Trujillo has a very serious problem, said Licenciado Arriaga. Isidra kept the title in the blue rebozo against her body, the way one keeps what finally belongs to her. Don Hilario and Doa and Edina arrived at the little house a week later. They didn't come alone. They brought the notary Trujillo and the family's eldest son, with that expression of those who believe the matter can still be settled if they arrive with enough certainty on their faces. Isidra received them in the corridor. Juana was sitting in the rocking chair with her hands in her lap. Mateo was inside with the book the neighbor had brought him. Don Hilario went straight to it. We know you went to the Hacienda at night. You took things that don't belong to you. They belong to me, said Isidra. A judge will decide that. It's already decided. She took the title from the rebozo. She set it on the corridor table. The title of La Providencia has my name. Registered, valid, Licenciado Arriaga confirmed it. The notary Trujillo looked at the document. His face changed. Then arrived Licenciado Arriaga, who had agreed to be present. Then arrived Juana's cousin, as witness that the documents had reached the court in order. And there arrived, without anyone expressly calling them, 4 ranch workers whom Don Hilario had dismissed the week of the death, who had learned that there would be a resolution about La Providencia that day. Don Hilario looked at the workers. This is a family matter. An old man who had known Rodrigo since he was a boy answered unhurriedly, Don Rodrigo was of Doa Isidra's family, not the other way around. Don Hilario had no answer for that. Licenciado Arriaga spoke with precision and without raising his voice. The registry the notary Trujillo had used to remove Isidra's name corresponded to an earlier document already replaced. The title, in effect, was the one Rodrigo had registered 6 months before. Trujillo's action was null at best, fraudulent at worst, and the municipal court already had knowledge of it. Trujillo closed his briefcase. He said nothing. Doa Enedina looked at her husband. Don Hilario had his eyes on the title Isidra had set on the table, that paper with his daughter-in-law's name printed in ink and seal in official registry, that couldn't be erased by will or by custom or by how long one insisted on erasing it. It was then that Isidra spoke. Quiet voice. The voice of someone who took a long time to reach that moment, but has now arrived. This paper has my name because Rodrigo wanted it so. Not his, nor yours. Mine. A pause. You can go. Doa Enedina stood up first. Trujillo was already on the road. Don Hilario stayed a moment looking at Isidra with that expression of someone losing something that was never theirs and that still costs them to let go. Then he left. The workers left afterward in silence. Juana hadn't moved from the rocking chair the whole time. When the road was empty, she spoke. And now? Now home, said Isidra. Juana nodded slowly. She rose from the rocking chair with the slowness of bodies over 60 years old. She took her sack. Do you want me to come with you? Isidra looked at her. I wasn't going to ask you any other way. By the time the May rains came to Chiapas, the garden of La Providencia already had 3 weeks of new work on it. It smelled of turned earth and fresh herbs, and of the jasmine Isidra had replanted in the first quadrant, because the jasmine she had sown 7 years before had survived the administrator's neglect the way things with deep roots survive. It smelled of clay pot coffee from the big kitchen where Juana had resumed her place as if she'd never left, and of wood fire, and of Chiapas black beans that are made slowly and taste different from all the rest. Mateo had taken charge of one plot of the garden. He sowed without much method, but with much conviction, and what grew for him he looked at with the wonder of someone discovering that things respond when one tends to them. Between the furrows of soft earth there were no stones to knock him down. Rodrigo's silver medallion hung in the garden's niche, beside the Virgin that Isidra had put back in her place the first day of their return. The chain was new, one Juana had put on it. The back still had its tiny compartment, but it was empty now. The paper had done its work. Juana sat in the afternoons in the rocking chair she'd brought from Ta Amada's little house, because at La Providencia there was no corridor chair she liked as much. She looked at the garden. She looked at Mateo. She looked at Isidra. One of those days she said to her, from the rocking chair, Don Rodrigo had more faith in you than in anything he owned. Isidra kept setting the plant she was setting. I sometimes wonder if that faith was enough. Look at the garden, said Juana, and tell me if it wasn't enough. Isidra looked at the garden. She looked at Mateo crouched among the plants with his elbows full of earth. She looked at the medallion in the niche. She looked at the jasmine that had survived. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Sometimes inside someone who seems defeated there is something the world hasn't yet known how to see. Rodrigo saw it. Juana knew how to keep it. And Isidra retrieved it from the only place her husband had been able to leave it for her, inside something small, of silver, that no one else thought to look at. Do you believe a person can begin again, even when they can no longer recover the life they had before? Leave it in the comments. It gives me great joy to know how these stories reach each heart. If this story touched your soul, subscribe to Stories Between Lives and turn on the bell so you don't miss a single tale. Share it with someone who right now needs to remember that the truth is hard to bury when someone honest cares for it. Until the next story. A heartfelt embrace, from heart to heart. And the garden of La Providencia bloomed that May as it hadn't in a long time, and Mateo learned to walk among the rose bushes without falling, with his mother always close but no longer holding on so much.